Where is the output of WCL?
The lens.
Inside lens.txt. So what do I have to type in now?
So
Lens.txt. Did that work?
No.
Why not?
Because it doesn't recognize that there should be a 0 in front of the 9.
It doesn't recognize there should be a 0 in front of the 9. What it actually did was it sorted in alphabetical order. So you see that all the 1s come before the 2s, and that's why 9 is the last line here. And then after the 1s have been sorted, you see that the 0 came before the 2, which came before the 5, and so on and so forth. But this is not the kind of sort we want to do. We actually want to do a numerical sort, which fortunately sort lets you do. So sort minus n will numerically sort lens.txt. And you see that this does the right thing. It puts the 9 on top and the 107 in the bottom. Okay, how many of you are lost? Do you want me to go over this again? Raise your hand and I will. Okay. Can someone summarize what we just did? Remember, our task was to look at all of these PDB files and figure out which one of them was the smallest. Okay? And what were the steps that we followed to do this? Yes. Our first step was to do what?
We redirected the output of the word count.
So we took word count minus L and we ran it on all of our PDB files, and that gave us this. Okay, what did we do with this? We redirected it to a file called lens.txt. And that created this file lens.txt. And the reason we needed to create this file lens.txt was because so we can use sort. Remember, sort expects a file name, so you need to give it a file name lens.txt. And you see that this gives us a sorted list of all our files. Okay, we can actually go one step further here. We can run the sort command, sort n lens.txt. And remember, I'm cycling through my commands here by typing in the up and the down arrows. So anyway, you can take this command, sort n lens.txt, and you can redirect its output to this new file, let's say sorted.txt. If I hit enter now, am I going to see any output? No, I'm not. Because it's been redirected to sorted.txt. If I look at sorted.txt, what will I see? I will see all the files sorted by by the number of lines. So you see that methane.pdb is on top, and obviously total is in the bottom. Let's say you wanted to not, when you typed in cat, you see that it typed all the contents of this file. If there were 1,000 files, there would be 1,000 lines. And that might just be a lot for you to take in. Let's say you wanted to look at just the first few lines of a file. Right, just to get an idea of what's in it. How many of you know the command to do this? Alright, so that's the command to do this is called head. Head will show you just the first few lines of a file. So head sorted.txt will show you the first, by default, 10 lines of a file. But because sorted.txt is so small, it just shows you everything in that file. You can actually supply an argument to head or a switch, n, and specify how many lines you want to see. Okay, so head minus n3 will actually give you only the first 3 lines. And head minus n1 will give you only the first line. And head minus n4 will give you the first 4, and so on and so forth. And if there's a head, there has to be a tail. So tail n4 will give you just the last 4 lines of the file. And tail n1 will give you the last line of the file.
What happens if you don't use the minus n?
Sorry, what?
What happens if you don't use the minus n?
It works only on some systems, only on GNU compatible systems. And so it's just safer to use the minus n. the question was what happens if you get rid of the minus n, and this will work on some systems and it will fail on the others, but it's just safer and more portable to use the minus n, and it's more explicit, which is always a good thing. Okay, so why did we introduce head and tail? Here we go. So here's what I need to do if I want to get the file with the smallest number of lines. I run wcl on all my PDB files, and I put that in lengths.txt. And then I sort numerically lengths.txt, and I put that in sorted.txt. And then I do head minus n 1 sorted.txt. And that gives me the smallest file. These are the three commands that will give me the smallest file. And they'll work no matter how many PDB files I have. Remember, these are very portable commands. But you see that in the process, you've created these files, lengths.txt and sorted.txt, that are not really part of your analysis. You see that in the first command, you create lengths.txt. In the second command, you use lengths.txt as an input and create sorted.txt. In the third command, you use that file as the input. In effect, you've created this thing called a pipeline. A pipeline is a sequence of commands or programs or processes in which the output of one command turns out to be the input for the second command. And Unix gives you this really neat way of organizing pipelines or expressing pipelines. For example, you see that lengths.txt is the output of my first command, and it's also the input for my second command. So I can sort of chain these commands together. I can say run word count on all my PDB files and pipe the output to sort n. Okay, and that's a mouthful. First of all, a lot of you might be wondering what this character is. It's not I, it's not L, it's actually the pipe character that lives right above the enter character or the enter key on most of your keyboards.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you sorted it in length, is there a way, instead of creating a new text file, can you just sort it and save it right back into length text?
You can't, unfortunately. But you see that we'll see shortly that you don't even need to create these text files. Okay, so anyway, let me go back to what's happening here. What we're expressing here is run wcl on all the PDB files, and whatever the output of that is, use that as input to sort minus n. Okay, does this make sense? It's a lot. There's a lot going on here, but this in effect will do exactly what you expect it to. It word counts the PDBs and then it sorts it. And remember, this is the output of this collective command, and we want only the first line of this output. So what are we going to do now?
Another pipe.
Another pipe, and we pipe it to
Head.
head. So you see that we've accomplished this thing here in this short single line command. We word count everything, all the PDB files. We take that output and use it as the input for sort, and whatever the output of that whole pipeline is, we provide that as the input to head minus n1. Okay, so a bunch of questions here. You see that the input to WC minus L is clear. What are the inputs to WC minus L? Star.pdb, that's what we're operating on. So WC minus L has its inputs. It knows what to operate on. But remember, here we had sort minus n lengths.txt. So the input to sort minus n was this file, lengths.txt. But how are we able to use, for example, sort minus n by itself doesn't work. It says, well, actually it doesn't say anything. It's expecting you to give it input. And so it doesn't work. But for some reason it worked inside this pipeline. Why is that?
It has an input from the.
It has an input, exactly. It has an input. It gets its input from WC minus L star.pdb. So whatever is the output of this command is used as input to sort minus n. And whatever is the output of all of this, it's used as the input for head minus n here. And so in effect, this pipeline will give you always the smallest PDB files in a collection of PDB files. How do we get the largest? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Put down your sticky notes, red or green, and modify or write your own pipeline that will always print the largest of a collection of PDB files. So in effect, when you run your pipeline, you must see octane.pdb when you hit enter.